Welcome to the Heart of Dad podcast. Heart of Dad is a podcast for entrepreneurs who are passionate about their families and business and looking to find more clarity, more balance and more alignment in all areas of their life. Come and join the community at heartofdad.com or on Facebook at groups/Heart of Dad. This week on Heart of Dad, I'm interviewing John McIntosh. John is an experienced HR professional and a trained executive coach with a supervised practice. Over the last 10 years, he's been working with businesses to understand the employee proposition and deliver a great range of solutions, latterly focusing on employee health and wellbeing. He's recently set up his own Wellbeing Strategy consultancy business and is still finding his feet after 30 years in the corporate world. John has 50-50 custody for his 11-year-old son, who stays with him every other week. And John is also currently undertaking an MSc in Workplace Health and Wellbeing at the School of Medicine in Nottingham. So this week on Heart of Dad, I'm delighted to introduce John McIntosh. Hi, John.
Hi, Matt.
It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's great to have you here. So we're recording this just for context in, we're kind of like week 3 or week 4 of lockdown in the UK now, is that right?
Yeah, at least week 3.
Yeah, so that has been coming up in our discussion before we hit the record button, and I'm sure I just want to give a little bit of context because there's some really interesting avenues that we might explore in the podcast around that. But before we get into that, John, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thanks, Matt. I'm John. I'm a single dad. I've got an 11-year-old son. I have 50% custody of my son. Thankfully, I have a amicable relationship with my ex, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about that later, hopefully. Currently, I'm not working. Coronavirus kind of put a bit of a halt to some business development around setting up a new business. I'm sure we'll talk about that too. So I'm also studying an MSc in Workplace Health and Wellbeing, so that's keeping me entertained, as well as obviously entertaining my son in the time that he's with me. Prior to all of this happening, my background is in HR. I have 30 years of experience as an HR professional, working mainly for large organizations. And just moved out of the corporate world towards the back end of last year. So that's kind of me. I live in Scotland, and yeah, I think that's me.
That's brilliant. Thank you. It's a great kind of quick pen portrait of who you are. And I wonder if we might start actually with when we first got in contact. You were telling me that you were about to start this business, and this was a kind of early January, I think, this year. And clearly, for you and myself and everybody at the moment, kind of the world has turned upside down in terms of the economy and some of our freedom to operate. And just give me a sense of how that's played out for you, in trying to start a business and at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the kind of person who likes to in too much detail, so I had a kind of a broad brush idea of how things might go when I left my employer at the end of September of last year, which was I was going to take 6 months to do a bit of traveling, do a bit of studying, help my partner out with her business, which has been struggling a little bit, and start business development and move into doing wellbeing consultancy and coaching. So that plan kind of started off relatively well, although I was quite ill actually when I left the organization I worked for. I was ill for about a month, which was frustrating because it wasn't in my plan to kind of be bedridden for a month. So that kind of made me realize that even with a broad brush plan, things might not always work out the way I expected. And then, so having done a bit of traveling and done some fun stuff with my son, like go to Disney, we started the new year with all good intentions, I launched my business on LinkedIn, started to create some really good connections, had a couple of pieces of work lined up, and then coronavirus kind of put a stop to all of that very quickly, just within a matter of days. So I kind of initially decided just to kind of keep plugging away with my contacts, but I think I realized that that really people's heads were not in the right place to be having those sorts of conversations. So even with a couple of pro bono coaching clients, it became really clear to me that they couldn't really focus on the kinds of things that they wanted to from a coaching perspective. They really needed to get back some basics in their lives, like caring for loved ones, or just ensuring that their kind of businesses were staying afloat. So I kind of made the right call to just give them the space and step back from that too. So that, I think, for me was, well, obviously it's been difficult, and financially it's quite a big worry. But I've kind of accepted that that's just the way things are at the moment, and I'm just taking the time to, I guess, just to be, I think is how best to describe it. So be with my son, be with my partner, albeit remotely, because she's self-isolating in her house, so I'm not seeing her physically, and taking some time to focus on studies, and actually connecting with friends and family on a daily basis, just checking in with people, making sure they're okay. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment, Matt.
Can I sort of ask you about it sounds like you have a lot of equanimity about the current situation, but I was wondering, like, even in our brief exchange of messages like a few months back, I really had a sense of kind of that you were at a turning point. Setting up a business it's a big emotional commitment as well as a financial and kind of resource commitment. So you'd already left your employment. You'd had some plans for the 6 months, and it kind of, it's like those plans. It's like the rug was pulled from under your feet, in a sense, through circumstance. And I wonder what the impact on you was at the time when you realised quite quickly that things weren't going to move in the direction that you were hoping for.
Yeah, obviously frustration, some sadness, but also just acceptance, I think, of the situation is so extreme, so unusual, and impacting everybody, that really quite quickly I picked myself up pretty quickly, actually, because I realized that actually I had loads to be grateful for in my life. I've got my health, I've got my son, I've got an amazing partner. I currently have a roof over my head. I've got lots of people who care about me. There's there's a lot of things that I think every person I could think of in my kind of circle of friends and acquaintances, I could think that they would be going through some significant challenges, regardless of their situation. They'd be going through some challenges that were probably equal or greater than mine. Either they had a relative that was maybe extremely vulnerable that they were really concerned about, or they literally have no income to fall back on. Whereas in my plan, I do still have some financial kind of safety net. So I think I just became very aware that actually this was a situation where I just had to accept that this is how things were, and kind of relax into it a little bit. I think initially I was trying to keep a lot of stuff going on LinkedIn, for example, and making sure that I was still commenting on things and and posting stuff. But again, I very quickly became aware that actually a lot of the stuff that I wanted to post or was posting was very similar to what everybody else was posting about.
Right.
And I thought, well, actually, what's the value in that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I love the sort of roundedness of your view about this. And, I heard something in there about, like, you didn't take the situation personally because it's a universal problem, right? Everybody's worlds have
very much
turned
so,
upside
isn't it?
which kind of helps. I can understand that. But I was also wondering, as I was listening to you speak, whether you're currently doing an MSc into wellbeing, and is there something in what you're learning or your career experience that's also helped equip you? Because we were talking earlier about the number of transitions in your life, and it seemed to me that this transition, particularly, you seem to be talking with a great deal of insight and calmness.
No, it's you talked about kind of the rug being whipped out from under my feet, as it were. That's very much how I felt when I separated. It wasn't something I was expecting. Hindsight is a great thing, but it certainly wasn't in my plan at all. And I went through a very difficult time because it felt that actually my reason for being was taken away from me, which was, I felt that what I was doing with my life was trying to be the best husband and dad I could possibly be. And I just felt that, I'd failed at that. So I think that's, coming through that experience and then recognizing that actually, there's lots of moving parts in these kinds of situations. And I think has helped me with this situation, which is just saying, okay, well, there's that acceptance, isn't it? To say, well, actually, this is the reality, and actually, what am I going to do with the reality, rather than wallow in sadness. It's like, well, okay, this is where we are. What am I going to do about it? And then from a wellbeing point of view, one of the big pieces of work that I did, which I enjoyed very much, was running a campaign on mental health. And I was also involved in setting up an employer-led network for disability. So, an awareness of mental health and how to maintain good mental health is something that I'm obviously kind of aware of and practice as well. So I've been doing yoga every morning, well, most mornings, shall we say, and just being quite mindful about stuff, and thinking about things that I'm grateful for every day. As I was mentioning earlier, there's so much to be grateful for, and there's people in a much worse situation than me. And I think all of that has helped me enormously.
I mean, they're great sort of levelers for emotional well-being that you're talking about. But just taking you back to that time when you said that your separation from your wife was unexpected in a sense. You saw yourself as a husband and a dad, and that particular rug in your life was pulled from under your feet. And take us back to that time, John, if you can, and how you lived those moments.
It's probably one of the most difficult times in my life, I would say. I was really quite devastated at the time, and through it all, although I did, I suffered a lot. I think it's a good word to use, because it was actually a physical feeling that I had a physical pain in my chest for a number of months, and anxiety. But again, quite kind of early on in the process, I chose to have a focus on how my son was going to come through this. So I think I made some decisions that were maybe a little bit different to decisions maybe other people might make, or decisions I might have made, which was around choosing not to be angry with my ex about what had happened, because I felt that that would be counterproductive and would damage the working relationship that we needed to have in order to put everything in place for my son to be okay. That, I think, took quite a lot of strength from my point of view. And I know certainly, I had friends who are saying, I'm really surprised at how you're taking this, and why aren't you, fighting her through the lawyers to get this, that, and the other. And it's something I really just didn't want to do, because I knew that it just would damage that relationship, and would ultimately affect my son. So the result of that was that we reached a very quick and very amicable arrangement, 50-50 split in custody. And to this day, we still have a good working relationship where we live close to each other. We're still in the same catchment area. Rory didn't have to change schools, and if something needs to be picked up from one another's house, it's something that can be done easily. The communication channels have remained open through that period. So even though it was really hard for me to swallow at the time, it's really paid off. I think for my son, but also for me, because it's just a lot less stressful. I know a lot of couples who split up around the same time as me, and they have such conflictive relationships with their exes that really they have a really tough time most of the time, just trying to negotiate even the most mundane of things in their kids' lives. So I'm very grateful that I chose that path.
Amazing. I mean, I've had a few dads on who've split from their partners, and actually, I think all of you who've shared have somehow come to that same place at different speeds, I think. But it's really interesting how, because my I don't know how I'd be in that situation, but I think for a lot of men, ego would have quite a big place, and that particularly if you felt wronged, or that things are out of kilter, that could become a big deal. And it sounds like, I was really struck actually in a few of the examples you shared today that somehow ego isn't massively at play for you, that you're able to transcend whatever those personal kind of niggles might be, or anger even, or rage in the case of some people, and say, actually, in the bigger picture, my relationship with my son is what's most important. I don't want to put myself through chronic or unnecessary stress, which I could do if I became conflictual in this. And I'm curious to know, like, how did you get to that insight? Do you because it's not everybody does, as you've just explained, with your peers and friends who haven't got to that place.
It's hard for me to say. It's I guess it's partly just the kind of person I am. I think there's, it's interesting you say about ego. I think there's like the yin and the yang. There's a light side and a dark side to that. I think there have been times that I have maybe made some decisions which haven't been in my best interest, because I have put other people first. I think there was an element of that in my relationship, where I actually, compromised on quite a lot of things in my life in order to maintain happiness. Or the perceived happiness of my partner. Mm-hmm. And I think that certainly played out in the separation, but actually in a really good way. But I think I've learnt over the last few years that it is okay for me to kind of don my own oxygen mask first, and that is really important for me to be selfish and look after myself, because ultimately I need to be okay in order to be able to look after others. So one of the things that I think that I learned again through that process of separation was in the workplace. I was extremely self-sufficient, very much played the role of the kind of the rescuer for others. If there's a thorny project, then I'd stick my hand up for it. If somebody was floundering, I'd leap in to save the day, and often to my detriment, because I'd end up working longer hours and maybe not even get the kind of the kudos for it. But what I found was when I went through separation, I was in such a bad place that I physically couldn't cope at work, and I couldn't be that person, and I actually had to allow others to look after me for a change, which was really uncomfortable for me. But I actually learned that that is really important. That relationships are built on people helping each other out, and actually, if that's always one way, yes, it feels great for you to be the guy who's always on the white charger. But actually, for the person that you're always saving, that's not great for their ego. And so it was fantastic. And actually, my relationships at work deepened significantly with a number of people who were really there for me through the process. So I really kind of learned from that too, which is it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to be the one that's being rescued. That's all right. So
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that story. Yeah, amazing. Because there's I was thinking like how these kind of trials by fire really shape us in our lives, and when you're on if it's on a spectrum of kind of helping, you described it as rescuing in a sense, and I can see myself in that. But I could see for myself when that went unchallenged, that it led me to get very close to burnout, because I just couldn't open myself to ask for help. It felt too difficult. And I love in your story that you kind of gave yourself permission in a sense to say, actually, I do need some help here. And what you saw from that, actually, that it wasn't the end of respect for you, but actually yes. it opened up deeper relationships with people.
Yeah. But I think it got to the point where literally I didn't have a choice, Matt. I was, I literally couldn't function in the way that I needed to at work. And therefore, that at that point, I had to accept the help. But now I'm much better at it as a result.
Yeah. Life teaches us these lessons,
yes.
Doesn't it? And it keeps on teaching them until you kind of pay heed, in my experience.
Yes.
Just turning back to your relationship with Rory, and he was just in six and a half when you yes. separated. And how did that play out with him? How did you manage it as parents with him?
Well, we very much worked together to understand how we would position it with him. We took some advice on the best approach to take. We've always been of one voice, so we never kind of talk badly of the other in front of him. So he knows that we still operate. Parents. I mean, I think I've always had a great relationship with him because I've always been a very hands-on dad. Even before separation, I was working flexibly and spending time with him and sharing the caring of him. So I have a really close relationship with him. We laugh a lot together. We do a lot of crazy stuff together, like. Day before yesterday, we set up a tent in the living room and camped in the tent overnight, and then the next morning we decided that we needed a spa break, so we created a spa hotel in the house. So so we he's I think in some ways he's quite similar to me in that he likes to kind of play with his imagination and muck about a bit. So we got on great, and it's so so fantastic and so precious to have that. it's absolutely the most important thing in my life is having that relationship with him. Everything else pales into insignificance, and that's that is what I'm kind of all about.
Beautiful. That sounds like your true north is set in your relationship with your son.
Yep, it is.
I've been asking other dads who come onto the podcast about their relationship with their own fathers. And it sounds like you have a beautiful relationship with your son. How was your relationship with your dad?
Not like that. Probably it's the experience of others as well. That I think there's a driver in me not to have the childhood for him to have the childhood that I had. I had a very, very unusual childhood in that I was brought up in remote areas of Latin America as a child, a son of missionaries. So very much a little island of Britishness in the middle of Latin American culture. And my father was very dedicated to his work, so he traveled a lot to spread the word, and I was at home, homeschooled by my mother with my three sisters. I think my dad, tried to kind of do fatherly things with me, but they didn't really match the kind of stuff that I enjoyed doing. So I think he tried to make an effort at times, but I think he just found that I was a very different kind of person to him, and I think he struggled with how to deal with that. I think the lovely thing is that now I have a really nice relationship with my dad. I had to kind of go on quite a long journey to get there, but I love him very much, and we talk very, very often, and we're at peace. I think all this gets passed down the generations. He would say that his dad was absent for a key part of his childhood because of the war, and that made him not really engage with me, or not understand how to engage with me. I have a different opinion, because I could say, well, then if that's the case, then I wouldn't know how to engage with my son. But that's life's too short to kind of hang on to these things, and I'd rather enjoy the time I have with my dad now, and focus my energies on being the best dad I can be for Rory, really.
What was the turning point in your relationship with your dad?
I don't think there was a specific one. I think it was just over time. I think there's obviously an element of when you become a dad yourself. I don't think for me that was particularly pivotal. It probably accentuated for me some questions around why my dad wasn't a better dad, because being a dad for me was so amazing, so fantastic, and I just wanted to be the best dad I could possibly be, that it kind of struck me, why did my dad feel the same way? But then obviously different time, different dynamic. He had more than one child, and living in very difficult circumstances where he was having to be lots of different things, not just a dad. So yeah, just I think over time it just I've softened, knocked off a few corners, and just accepted that actually that's in the past, and let's live for the now.
One kind of through line I'm hearing from you in this conversation is that the quality of relationships is primary in your life. If that's really what I've heard from you, is like, if there's one thing you prioritize, it's having a good quality relationships. Does that ring true?
Yeah. I think that's absolutely true, actually. Yeah, I maybe haven't ever thought about it that way, but yeah, I'm very much a people person, I think.
Yeah, I really hear that, because it's interesting. Like, these conversations I have are quite organic with people, and I tend to sort of follow my nose in a sense. And we could be talking business and your coaching practice and your wellbeing practice, and I'm sure there'll be space for that if you want to in the conversation. But it seems to me what I really hear from you is this beautiful kind of heart connection that you have with people, and that you've been able to let go of stories that you could easily get attached to, because I'm listening and as we always do, kind of making contrasts and comparisons with ourselves. And I was thinking, like, actually, my relationship with my dad has been fraught at times, and for a lot of my life, I think not so much in the recent years, but a lot of my life, I held on very tightly to my story of being aggrieved and
Yeah.
of kind of things being unjust. And it's like really refreshing to hear you go, actually, the relationship with him was more important than the story. That's kind of a beautiful thing to take away from this.
Yeah. And I think one of the really kind of humbling moments for me as well was again when I went through separation, because I'd been very focused on keeping my partner happy, and I compromised on a lot of things in my life, particularly around the relationships I had. So I actually lost contact with a lot of my really close friends from kind of university years, and my circle of friends very much became her circle of friends. But then obviously when I separated, anybody who's been through a separation is, there's a separation of breaths as well. It's quite tricky to stay friends with the same people. What I found really quickly was that I reached back out to people I'd lost touch with, and actually people who'd been through some pretty tough stuff, and I hadn't really been there for them during those times, because my focus had been on my relationship. And to a person, they were all fantastic and just welcomed me back, were there for me, supported me through what I was going through, and I now have amazing, really rich, fantastic relationships with all of those people. And it just made me realize that actually, it is all about relationships. And really, what else is there in life? We're human beings. We're in a system where we interact with other human beings. Yes, we build these worlds around us of business and commerce and culture and everything. But if you don't have relationships, then none of that is really important, I would say. That's the way I see things.
Yeah, and of course, all those businesses, or the vast majority of them, are also built on relationships. The two are not mutually exclusive, even though sometimes, when I speak to entrepreneur dads, we talk about business as the entity, but actually it's never that. It's the relationships that are the entity.
Yes.
Or in many ways it is anyway. So yeah, I mean, the other thing that popped into my mind, John, was about I love how you described navigating your separation, which was an incredibly difficult time for you, and being of one mind with your ex-wife about how to co-parent Rory. But did guilt play a role at that time in your life? Had you around your role as a parent and the impact of separation, even if it wasn't your choice?
I would say that it didn't, because of the circumstances I was in. The choice was not mine, and I tried very hard to find a way for us to fix things, but that wasn't the path that my ex wanted to go down. So I knew that the situation was that situation, and there was absolutely nothing in my power that I could do to change that, beyond suggesting on more than one occasion that we should try and speak to a counselor and try and patch things up. So I don't think really guilt hasn't been a driver for me around that. I would say the driver for me has just been to try and put myself in his shoes try and make the best possible decisions. I mean, sometimes, you're in a situation where sometimes there is no right answer or good answer, because there will be times that he's sad, or there will be times that he wants to be with one parent and he's with the other parent, or there will be times that he wishes that we could all do stuff together, and that's not possible. It's just I think trying to do the best I can, and where I can't make everything right, it's just being there for him and recognizing his sadness or his anger, and just being there for him during those times.
Yeah, sounds a lovely way of being with your son, kind of just to accept that perfection isn't possible in this situation, and therefore there's going to be some repercussions that you can help him navigate.
Yeah, and he's very good at giving me feedback. That's for sure. He's not backwards at coming forward. So sometimes he'll say, you're not doing a very good job of this, Dad. So I will listen to him and take the feedback. And sometimes I'll say to him, look, I'm just doing the best I can do, and this is the best that we can do right now. So I know it's not great, and I'm sorry about that, but that's just how it is. But there's other times that he's absolutely right. And I think earlier on in the separation, I was finding myself getting quite annoyed with him, and quite kind of bossy about things he was doing right, things he was doing wrong, and him getting upset about that. And again, there's a great book actually, which is one of my friends recommended, which is How to Talk So Your Kids Will Listen, and Listen So Your Kids Will Talk. And that was really helpful for me. There's some very basic listening skills in there. And you think, well, God, trained coach, you think you'd have good listening skills, but when the dynamic is different with your child, isn't it? So,
yes. Yes.
but that really, really helped me, and that made a big difference. And I've just found that things are so much easier now if I just give him the space to vent, to talk, and just to listen. That's been a big thing in our relationship, for the good.
It sounds so. It's such an important thing is to create that environment, isn't it, where a child can feel heard. And I'm always struck by people who have a childhood where that isn't the case, and they find a way to do it themselves, but either through force of nature or through learning about how to cope in a different way. It's such a gift to their children and to themselves. One other question I had for you was, obviously Rory, he's 11 now, so he's kind of just getting to a preteen phase. And
oh yes.
my son, at the time of this recording, my son's just about to turn 6, so he's at a very different stage of life. But I know that his development seems to always outpace my understanding. I'm always playing catch up, in a sense that he moves on faster than I do. And I have to kind of keep reminding myself of that. And having both the mirror and sometimes pleasant and unpleasant of a partner in situ, but also a sounding board for us to reflect on where he's at and what he needs, has been helpful to me. And I'm wondering how you've managed that process within yourself. Are you still it sounds like you have a strong relationship with your ex-wife, but how has that played out for you? Have you recalibrated yourself as your son has got older and as a parent?
Or he, you're absolutely right. He's preteen, so if he's acting up, he'll say, "Oh, Dad, it's you should understand. It's the hormones. That's why I'm behaving like this. Which is very convenient." Yeah, I obviously, as I said earlier, have got a constructive relationship with his mum. So, we will at times have a conversation about, how we think he's getting on, or, if there's anything he's particularly struggling with. So he, for example, has dyslexia, so he can get very frustrated about things sometimes. So we will discuss, what we think's worked when we've been doing stuff with him. And my partner as well, she's great. She's doesn't have kids herself, so she has a very different perspective on things. And she'll often say, but he's a kid. He's going to be difficult at times. And actually, you can't always keep him happy. I think she probably thinks that I'm I go too easy on him, or I'm very much always trying to appease him, as it were. Whereas I think from her perspective, she thinks I'm maybe just go a bit over the top. So I think that's a good lever as well, in terms of thinking, okay, well, am I actually just do I need to just kind of tackle this behavior a bit more directly, or actually is the approach I'm taking the right approach? So I will, I think that helps me to reflect as well. But
yeah,
I mean, he's a really, I would say, I'm lucky, but he's a really good kid. He's a really good kid. And so, there's very little conflict, to be honest. And when there is conflict, we find a way to resolve it fairly quickly. So, which is fantastic.
That sounds great.
But I'm sure that won't always be the case.
Well,
I'm under no illusions that in 3 years' time that he's not going to say, I hate you at least once a week.
But sounds like you have some great foundations for open conversations with him. How have you navigated your personal relationships, your intimate relationships, in the context of being a parent with shared custody? How's that worked out for you?
Well, it was a completely new concept to me, having been married for nearly 20 years. So, that starting all of that stuff again was a challenge in itself. We won't go into that, but in terms of how I manage my relationship with my partner, is she really from the outset we've always kind of discussed how our relationship works in that context. And she's very clear that actually one of the things that she says to me is that one of the things that attracted her to me was the fact that I did have Rory as my top priority, that I was took my role as a parent extremely seriously, and that actually I couldn't have a relationship that wouldn't take that into consideration. And so she absolutely recognizes that, and is very supportive. She does spend time with me, but mainly when my son isn't here. He has met her, and I am working to build a good relationship between them. But again, we, my partner and I, discuss all of this, and we work out what the best approach is. So, for example, during lockdown, she's in her flat, and I'm here, and period when my son isn't here because of obviously risk of infection, etc. So that's that was a tough call for us, but we ultimately believed that was the right thing to do. So yeah, it's there's a lot of compromise in there, but again, it's just being really honest about who I am and what's important to me, and she understands that, and she appreciates that. And yeah, I know it can be tough for her at times, and tough for me, but it's just the way it is, and we know it's not always going to be like that. Rory will ultimately grow up, and things will change again, and that's just how it is at the moment. But things will continue to evolve, I'm sure, but just in their own time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, understandably. And before we hit the record button, we were talking a little bit about transitions and how that's been a real kind of a through line in your life. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about those transitions and experiences? Because you said there've been sort of plenty since that big one you told us about earlier.
Yes. So obviously, we talked about separation being a big transition. I think another transition for me was obviously moving out of the corporate world and becoming self-employed. And actually, I had a kind of a false start of that just over a year ago, where I went into partnership with somebody, and it was a bit of a car crash, to be honest. And that in itself was a tough learning experience. Again, for me, I think what was playing out there was I was quite keen to please the person I was going to partnership with, and therefore kind of compromised on what was important to me in that process. I was still working full time, and the project I was on was extremely challenging. My son had just gone back to school and was having a really tough time because of his dyslexia and adjusting to the next year up. And it just got to the point where it was all completely unmanageable. And what broke the straw that broke the camel's back was I went to meet my son from school and walked down the road with him, and he cried all the way home, and I couldn't understand why he was so upset. And in the end, he said, it's because when we get home, Dad, you're just going to ignore me. You're just going to go and sit on the computer for the rest of the day. And it was just that moment of wake up. So actually, this is just not working. I appreciate that. When you're starting your own business, you have to make sacrifices and compromise on things, but this just wasn't working. So I pulled the plug on that partnership, which was extremely difficult because I'd invested money in it, and the other person invested in it as well, and it didn't really end well for either of us, but it was absolutely what I needed to do at that point. And for me, there was kind of two big learnings that I got from that. And I think the first was to listen to my body, because I think all the signs were there. I think you were talking about burnout earlier, Matt. All the signs were there that this was not good. I was waking up at 4 o'clock every morning. I was having palpitations. There's a whole bunch of symptoms that I just wasn't listening to. I was just blocking them out and saying, of course I'm going to be feeling, anxious. This is just the adrenaline pumping through me, this exciting new business, and not helped by my partner being very much that sort of person. Business partner being that sort of person. She was prepared to kind of go to the ends of the earth to make this business work, but then her situation was completely different. She was single. She didn't have a partner. She didn't have kids. So that was a big lesson for me, which is listen to what your body said. Your body was shouting at me to say, I actually had my first migraine ever, and even then I was like, oh, was something funny going on with my eyesight? I think it must be migraine, and I just kind of shrugged it off, even though I'd never had one before. But so that was I think the first big lesson from that, and the second was just being kinder to myself, just giving myself a break to say, you know what, it's okay. You can't do everything. You cannot physically hold down a really difficult project, be a full-time dad 50% of the time, and set up a new business all at the same time. It's just physically not possible. You're not failing. It's just not possible. And again, the feedback I got from my very close friends was, John, you'd be the first to tell other people, or to be kind to other people. Why aren't you kinder to yourself? And yeah, I didn't really have an answer for that at the time. I think it's still something I struggle with a little bit, being a bit too hard on myself. But I think I did learn a lesson then. So I put all that on hold, and I waited until the time's right to set up my business. Well, we know how that worked out with coronavirus, but at least I didn't get a migraine.
Yeah. That's an amazing story. I mean, I think that will resonate so much with other dads listening who've been trying to set up businesses, and resonates with my own story. I've had a few goes, and the first one I was very lucky, great partnership with people who are dear friends, and it was very successful. The one after that, there was a terrible clash of personalities, and amongst the three people, I was one of three, and it just went horribly wrong. And I had a good sense of that way before I finally decided enough was enough, really. But
it's listening, isn't it? And paying attention. So all the warning signs were there, like way before I even went into the partnership, and I just kept ignoring them because I kept thinking I was being a coward, and that I was just not being brave enough, and that somehow miraculously things would be fine when clearly there was some significant differences in our styles that weren't going to change. So that was a big learning for me. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that arrow to the heart with your son Rory telling you, crying on his way home from school. I mean, that's kind of the.
It still hurts.
Yeah. I felt the pain of that as you said it. Goodness, that's a heartbreak moment. Yeah. It's been such a great conversation, John. I've really loved getting into I think this is really a beautiful heart of dad conversation, because you have shown so much heart in this conversation. Really appreciated it.
Thank you.
If people want to find out more about you, where can they go?
So I'm on LinkedIn, and my business is called Seesaw Consulting Limited. That's also on LinkedIn. I'm not sure at the moment what the future holds for me. As we were talking about before the recording, Matt, my number one priority is going to be providing for my son. So it may be that I need to go back into the corporate world, maybe for a time anyway, just to keep the money coming in. But yes, I'd be absolutely delighted to talk to anyone really. About wellbeing coaching or anything. My experiences, it'd be lovely to connect. So LinkedIn's the best place to find me. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, John.
Thanks, Matt.